I absolutely love shooting in a studio, and one of the main reasons why is because if I need to mask my subject off of the background, it's always really easy. So I have this image here. It was shot against a gray background. There are a couple of different tonal differences. You'll see it's lighter in the middle and darker around the outside, but it's still going to be super simple to get rid of. On the left-hand side of my screen, there's something called the Extras tab inside Perfect Layers. These are my extras, ones that I've included in the suite, and then the On One extras, which are the free backgrounds, borders, and textures that are automatically included in the photo suite when you get it. And I can add in a new background to replace this boring gray one. Now, underneath the On One extras section, when we open up backgrounds, you'll notice that there are a couple of different subcategories. We've got studio backdrops, there's indoor and outdoor scenes. We've got simple things like gradients. So if you don't want to add anything really crazy, you just want to add a very soft gradient or a little bit of noise, you can do that. Now, if you don't find a background that you like, you can also include your own, and that's what I've done. If you open up My Extras and go to backgrounds, you'll see I have 3 different background categories. I've got bokeh backgrounds, grunge backgrounds, and then just a general category of Liz's backgrounds. And each one of these has different types of images that I like to use. Now, for this photo, I'm going to open up the bokeh backgrounds. I want something really soft behind this subject. I want him to stand out, but I want a little bit more color, something that's a little bit more interesting. And I've got a lot of different options here. Now, whether it's one of your own backgrounds or one that's included by On One, to add in a new backdrop, go ahead and just double-click the photo of your choice. It'll ask you whether you'd like to edit a copy or add this as a layer. You want to make sure that you avoid Edit Original. We want to leave the original files the way that they are. If you need to do a lot of work to a background beforehand, if there are people you need to remove, if you got to change the color of it, you can edit a copy of that file and then paste it into your subject image later. But I highly recommend you don't do that. Most of the time, I choose Add as a Layer. And what that's going to do is it's going to take this new backdrop and it's going to add it into my layer stack on the right-hand side of my screen in my existing file. So I'm going to choose that option and click OK in the bottom right-hand corner, and it will take that background and add it right over there on the right. Now, they are mismatched right now. So the background is on top of my subject and the subject is on the bottom, which is not what I want to do. So I need to click and drag this layer underneath my subject. Now, when you're ready to actually do the masking, make sure you have the right layer selected. I can't tell you how many times I've made this mistake where I have my background accidentally selected. I try and remove the boring background that I want to get rid of and nothing happens. And it's because I've got the wrong layer chosen. So click on the layer with your subject. Then you can go over to the left-hand side, and there are lots of different ways to mask here. My favorite, especially with studio backdrops, is the Quick Mask tool. Most of the time when you're working in a studio, have a really simple background, and so the Quick Mask tool is going to work great. I'm just going to use it to click and drag across the background. I'm going to make sure I get the darker tones and the lighter tones here, just in case. It'll go through, process, and now I've got a new background. Most of the time, the Quick Mask tool does, I would say, 80 or 90% of the work for me. It did a really awesome job with this. There are just a couple of little areas that I'm going to need to clean up. To do that, I recommend that you zoom in a little bit. Just once or twice, get a little bit closer to the subject that you're going to be refining the edge around. Then you can pay much closer attention to the spots you need to get rid of. There are a couple different tools that you can use. One of my favorite is the masking brush. Now, when you choose the masking brush, up in the tool options bar, there's an option called the Perfect Brush. And this is our edge detection tool. It works really, really well in very simple situations like this and complicated situations. But I think that when it comes to studio backdrops, it's spot on. I'm going to make sure that's checked, make my brush a little bit bigger, and we're just going to click and drag around the edge of my subject. And it's just removing a lot of that excess gray that's around the edge there. Now there's still a little bit left over, but we're going to get rid of that in just a minute. So don't worry about the fact that there's still a little bit of extra. We're just starting the cleanup process. Now if we need to, we can go down a little bit and let's maybe find a couple of other spots we need to clean up. So I'm going to go down to the right. Let's get rid of some of those areas there. We'll go over to the left and clean up along his arm. Now, if you make a mistake, if for some reason you're going in and you'll see there's this little area right next to his arm that accidentally ate into his shirt. Maybe the brightness of that area of his purple shirt was too close to the gray and it ate in a little area that I didn't want. If you go up to your tool options bar, you can swap your mode from paint out, which means we are painting out the background we don't like, to paint in. Now I can paint back in an area that accidentally got removed. So let's paint that little spot right back in, and our shirt is back. So just in case the quick mask goes overboard, if you accidentally go and let's just say, oh no, we ate into his arm and it looks horrible. Any mistakes like that you make, you can just go up to the mode drop-down menu and swap it over and paint back in an area that you may have accidentally gone over. Now, the other tool that I like to use in a situation like this is called our refine brush. It refines the edge of a mask that's already been created. So it is really important that you use the quick mask tool before you use the refine brush. We'll go ahead and select that. Up in the tool options bar, there's something called color decontamination. I usually leave this on. It works best with backgrounds that are really bright, like green screens, or if you're shooting against a really bright blue sky, and it looks at the color information of the background in the foreground and pays attention to the differences and helps cut out a lot of that extra really bright color. It works wonderfully with things like green screens. For a background like this, it's not going to make much of a difference, but I can go ahead and leave it on anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my refine brush and we're going to click and drag. Let's go over the right-hand side of the subject here. It'll go through and kind of clean out the rest of that gray. We'll do it on the left-hand side here. Let's get through the beard, around the edge of the hair there. And again, it'll go through, it's going to refine the edge and kind of clean up some of those harsh lines. Did a really awesome job blending him in. Now the other tool, and the last tool that I like to use, is something called the chisel tool, and it chisels away a layer of pixels. This is really great when you don't need to do a lot of heavy refining, so I don't need to go through and refine this edge. I just need to chisel away that last little bit. So I'm going to take my chisel tool on the left-hand side, and you can adjust the amount of pixels you want to remove by going up to the tool options bar, and you'll see there's an amount slider. The larger the number, the more it's going to remove. So if I push this all the way up to 20, it's going to remove a lot more. I usually like to keep it down underneath 10 just to be safe. And then we can click and drag. Now if you remove too much, you can always undo. If you make any mistakes, you can always undo by pressing Control or Command Z. So I removed way too much. Let's take the amount slider and move it down even further. We're going to put it down to 5. And then we'll go through and just clean up that last little bit. We'll go around the edge of our mask here. We'll go up. And that's going to look a lot better. And we'll do it over on the left-hand side here as well. Just clean up that last little bit. And that looks a lot better. We'll go ahead and zoom out. And now our subject is blending a lot better with our new background. If there are any areas that you do need to clean up, you've got all 3 of those tools to be able to use: your masking brush with the perfect brush option, your refine brush, and your chisel tool. And those 3 are usually my favorites to use. Now, one of the best parts of working with a foreground and a background that are still on separate layers. So you'll see on the right-hand side, I've got my subject layer, my foreground, where I've masked out the boring background that I don't like, and then underneath is my new background. I can edit each one of these separately so that they blend a little bit better. And this is one of my favorite tricks about working with new backgrounds or new foregrounds. A lot of times the photos don't mix perfectly the first time around, so I need to go in and make adjustments. And because they're on separate layers, I can edit them separately. So let's go ahead and let's start out with my background. Let's change the color really quickly. So I'm going to select the background in my layers stack, go up to the top right and choose the program I want to go into. I'm just going to take it into Perfect Enhance right now. I want to make a really simple adjustment to it. Once inside Enhance, on the right-hand side, I'm going to make a really big adjustment in the Color and Tone Adjustments pane so I can kind of show you how these separate layers work. If I take the brightness slider and I move it all the way over to the right, or all the way over to the left, it's only affecting the bokeh in the background. It is leaving my subject alone. So this is what I mean by working on separate layers here. This is a great way of taking a look at that. Now I can make adjustments to just the background. So let's go ahead and let's darken it a little bit. I want him to stand out a bit more. Let's also go down and adjust the color. I want to warm it up even more. There's still a little bit of coolness that's happening that I don't like. So I'm going to take the temperature slider and I'm going to move that over to the right. And now it looks a little bit more like twinkly lights or maybe holiday lights that you might see on the street when you're walking around or whatever. It's got that nicer, warmer tone to it, which I think is going to play really well with the adjustments I make to the subject. I'm also going to take the vibrance slider and move that over to the right to add some more intensity to those colors. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom right-hand corner and click Apply. We're going to apply those changes. And once it's done, it's going to bring me back into Perfect Layers. Now you'll notice on the right-hand side there are two background layers now. The first is my original background layer that we started out with, and then on top is my new edited version. If for some reason you don't like the changes that you made, you realize you want to go back to your original layer, all you have to do is either hide the layer you don't like by clicking the eye icon. Now we'll go back to our original, or you can delete it by using the Delete Layer button at the bottom of your layer stack. Now let's go ahead and make some changes to the subject as well. I'm going to choose the subject layer, go up to the top right-hand corner, and let's go into effects this time. Let's make some changes. I'm going to start out on the left-hand side by choosing one of my favorite filters called Sunshine. And this is a good way to add a little bit of contrast and a little bit of warmth all in the same place. So I'm going to choose the Natural Sunshine preset right up at the top, and it will add that to my image. On the right-hand side of the screen, in the Filter Options pane, I can make some changes. And the amount slider just adjusts the amount of sunshine, so if we drop it down, that contrast kind of goes away. And if we push it up, he'll get a little bit more contrasty and a little bit brighter. I can also add a little bit of warmth to the subject here as well. I'm going to move that over just a couple of points. And then I can also play around with the saturation. So if I want to add a little bit more or a little bit less, I can do that. One of my other favorite things to apply is dynamic contrast. Now, when you're working with a portrait, you want to be careful with how much you apply, but we're going to go ahead and open that up, and I'm going to scroll down to the soft option. And before I apply a new filter, it's really important that you go over to the filter stack on the right-hand side and add a new empty layer. That will make sure that your sunshine layer gets saved. And now we're going to add that dynamic contrast on top of the sunshine layer we just applied. So we'll go ahead and click on the soft dynamic contrast. It adds just a little bit of oomph to my subject. I'm going to go over to the right-hand side and play around in my filter options pane. Let's adjust how much detail we're applying to all of the different elements in our photo. So we're going to add a little bit of small, medium, and large contrast here. What's great is you do have access to highlight and shadow recovery sliders. So if I need to recover some of the highlights or shadows, I can go ahead and do that. Or if I want to intensify the whites, for instance, brighten it up, and then maybe intensify the blacks just a little bit, I can do that. So you have all of these different options here that you can really play around with. It'll be up to you depending on the image that you're working on. Once you're done inside of Perfect Effects, go ahead and click Apply. It's going to save those changes. It's going to bring us right back into Perfect Layers. And just like with the backdrop, we're going to have our original photo layer with our subject and then our new Perfect Effects edit. These photos are blending a lot better than when I started, but if I do need to go back to the originals, I can always do that. Now, one of the last really cool tips that I want to give you when you're working with photos and combining a new background and foreground is if you go up to the Layer menu inside Perfect Layers, scroll down, there's an option called New Stamped Layer. And this is one of my favorite things to do. When I select that option, it's going to merge all of the layers we've been working with, my background and my foreground, and it's going to create a composite layer. Now, when I take this and I turn it on and off, you're going to see no difference. And that's because it's my new photo. It's the exact image that you and I are looking at on the screen right now, but it's combined the background and the foreground together, so I can add one effect to the entire photo. This is a good way to add consistency to an image, to apply an effect to the background and the foreground that helps them match. So now with that new composite layer, I can go into Perfect Effects one more time. And let's add something really, really obvious. I'm going to go over to the Presets library on the left of my screen. I'm going to open up the Matte presets. And this will be a really good way to make the image just kind of come together. A matte preset is a really, really great way to add consistency to a foreground and a background. I'm going to add this one called Faded Matte Simple. It's very, very subtle. And I'm going to go over to the right-hand side and click Apply. We're going to leave it the way that it is and jump right back into Perfect Layers. Now we have a matte effect on the foreground and the background. It's exactly the same, so the photo is going to look a little bit more like it blends, and it's going to look a little bit less disjointed than what we started with. So as you can see, there are a ton of different ways that you can play around with taking an image that was shot in a studio with a really boring background and create something really fun and really interesting by accessing multiple different layers inside your layers stack and playing around with different effects to help combine two different photos and make them appear as though they blend perfectly.